This is the brief on AI Decoded. Think of this weekly show as your very own universal translator, taking all that intimidating tech speak and turning it into practical, everyday language for folks without a technical background. First, we need to look at who this is actually for, because their core mission is to make artificial intelligence finally click for non-technical users. Since we aren't all programmers, the show acts as a strict filter for information, which really makes you wonder, if AI systems are so profoundly complex, how accessible can they genuinely be for an absolute beginner? Well, second, we see how the two hosts answer that by aggressively filtering the noise, separating what's actually useful.
Applying for jobs often feels like standing at the edge of a massive dark canyon, just shouting your qualifications into the void.
Yeah, it really does.
You spend hours agonizing over these documents, you send them off into the ether, and then you get absolutely nothing back. Just silence.
Right, which is exhausting.
Completely exhausting. So today on The Deep Dive, we are taking a massive comprehensive guide on AI career strategies and extracting a singular mission. We want to figure out how to use artificial intelligence, specifically Claude, to translate that silent exhaustion into targeted, undeniable value.
And we're going to unpack the entire journey for you today.
Exactly. From the very first draft of your resume to the final high-stakes words of your salary negotiation.
The core thesis we uncovered in this material is incredibly compelling. I mean, the bottleneck for most people is rarely a lack of substance or experience or, raw ability.
Right.
The bottleneck is presentation, somewhere between what you fundamentally know how to do and what actually lands on a recruiter's screen. Your actual value is getting lost in translation.
Because a resume written for every job is, well, it's effectively written for no job at all.
Precisely.
I used to think of tailoring a resume like grabbing a megaphone. Just trying to make my specific achievements louder than the next person's.
Right, just turning up the volume.
Yeah. But a megaphone just amplifies existing noise. It doesn't translate a dialect. Using Claude as a strategic partner is much more like utilizing a universal translator.
That's a great way to put it.
You are speaking the language of the applicant, and the company is speaking the language of the corporate job description. This tool bridges that exact language barrier.
That is the precise mechanism at play here. Because before you can even convince a human being of your worth, you have to get past the software reading your resume.
The applicant tracking systems, the ATS.
Exactly. We all know about applicant tracking systems and keyword scanners, but what is shifting now is how you can use Claude to run a predictive differential, basically comparing your current resume and the ATS parameters before you ever hit submit.
Okay, let's dive into that, because I think a lot of people just try to, stuff keywords at the bottom of their resume in white text.
Oh, yeah, the old invisible ink trick. That does not work anymore.
Right. But large language models parse language semantically, right? They understand context in a way a rigid keyword scanner just doesn't.
Precisely. A human recruiter knows that managed client relations and customer success lead mean the exact same thing.
Sure.
But an outdated ATS algorithm might dock your score because it was specifically programmed to look for the phrase customer success. What Claude excels at is semantic matching.
So you're feeding it the data directly.
Right. You feed it your existing resume and the target job description side by side, and you instruct it to map your truthful experiences to the exact vocabulary of the employer.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second.
Yeah.
If I'm using an AI to swap out my words for their words, isn't this just tricking the system? Inflating the resume to cheat a computer program?
It is absolutely not about fabrication, and that is a crucial distinction. It is entirely about framing reality correctly. You are not inventing skills out of thin air. You are ensuring that your actual hard-earned experience registers with the system's logic.
Makes sense.
Think of it like this. If you built a house, but the inspector's checklist only asks if you constructed a residential dwelling, you don't lose points for lying by changing your phrasing. You are just making sure they can actually hear what you are saying.
That makes total sense. It's about removing the friction of interpretation. And getting past the bots is only part of the battle, because there's also the passive language trap.
Oh, this is perhaps the most universal flaw in modern resumes. People default to describing their presence rather than their impact.
Like saying they were just in the room.
Exactly. They write phrases like responsible for managing a team or involved in the sales process.
Which, to be fair, is technically true for most people.
It is technically true, and it is completely forgettable.
Sure.
If a recruiter is reading 50 resumes back to back, they do not remember the candidate who was merely responsible for a department.
They remember the candidate who moved the needle.
Yes. You have to translate responsible for sales into grew territory revenue by 30% over 8 months. Specificity is credibility.
But I imagine the immediate pushback from anyone listening right now is, well, I don't have those exact metrics.
That's a very common fear.
Right. Not every job gives you a pristine dashboard with a neat ROI percentage at the end of the quarter. If I'm an administrative assistant or a mid-level designer, my instinct is to just leave the numbers out entirely rather than guess.
And that is exactly where you leverage Claude's analytical capabilities. If exact financial metrics aren't available, you prompt Claude to help you identify proxies.
Proxy metrics, how does that work?
You give it your bullet point and say, ask me 5 questions to help quantify this impact without misrepresenting it.
Oh, so you have it interview you.
Exactly. It will come back with questions like, did the project ship on time? How many users were impacted by the new system? How many hours per week did your new workflow save the team?
Wow, that's incredibly practical.
By answering those, Claude surfaces the latent value in your work and turns a generic claim into a concrete, undeniable metric.
So the practical workflow isn't just asking for a blind rewrite. You take your current resume, grab the job description, the company name, and the title.
Right.
You feed that into Claude, and you ask it to identify the 3 or 4 most critical areas to adjust for the specific role, using those proxy metrics where necessary.
It identifies which experiences to lead with and which language to swap out. It is a targeted, surgical adjustment. But here is the limit of beating the ATS. Algorithms don't hire people. They just don't reject them.
Right, they just open the gate.
Exactly. Once your optimized resume lands on a human screen, raw data isn't enough. Humans crave narrative.
Which brings us to the cover letter. I always think about it like this. If the resume is the list of ingredients in your career, the flour, the eggs, the sugar.
Oh, I like this.
The cover letter is the recipe. The resume just proves you have the raw materials. The cover letter shows how it all comes together to solve the employer's specific hunger.
That shifts the perspective entirely. You aren't asking for a job. You're offering a cure to their specific pain point.
Exactly.
If you look at the most successful applications in our research, they capitalize on 3 distinct opportunities that a resume simply cannot touch. First, they add dimension.
Dimension, yes.
A resume says what you did. A cover letter explains why you made a choice, what you learned from a failure, and how that shaped your professional philosophy.
It gives the data a pulse, essentially.
Second, successful cover letters connect the applicant's experience directly to the employer's current struggle. Every single job description is essentially a corporate cry for help.
Right. If they're hiring, someone is overwhelmed.
If they are hiring, it means something is broken, delayed, or missing. You use the cover letter to reflect that exact struggle back to them, proving you can solve it using a concrete example from your history. And third, it provides immediate proof that you did your research.
I imagine the trap here, though, is rambling. Like, if I'm using an AI, my instinct might be to just generate a massive 2-page essay about my entire career trajectory, because the AI makes it so easy to produce volume.
Oh, absolutely.
But a human recruiter will instantly trash that, won't they?
Without a doubt. The restraint is what makes it effective. Our research indicates a ruthlessly efficient 3-paragraph structure is optimal.
Just 3 paragraphs.
Just 3. Paragraph 1, why this specific company and why right now. Paragraph 2, the value case, highlighting one singular achievement that proves you can solve their core problem.
And the third.
Paragraph 3 is a clear, direct close asking for the next steps. It should never exceed 1 page.
But if I am feeding the job posting, my experience and my core achievement into Claude to write this structure, how do I prevent the output from sounding like a cold, generic robot? We've all read AI-generated text that just feels, well, soulless.
Yes, the robotic tone. This requires iterative prompting. You do not just accept the first draft. Large language models need tonal direction.
Like a director working with an actor.
Exactly like that. Once Claude generates the draft, you act as the director. If it sounds too formal, you prompt it, rewrite this using a more natural conversational register.
Or if it sounds arrogant, dial it back.
Right. If it sounds presumptuous, tell it to dial back the arrogance. You can even feed it a sample of an email you actually wrote and say, match this tone. The AI's job is to assemble the strategic elements. Your job is to guide the tone until it sounds like you on your absolute best, most articulate day.
Okay, so the optimized resume navigated the software logic. The highly targeted, narrative-driven cover letter gave the human recruiter the context they needed. You get the email. You're invited into the room for the interview.
This is where the translation often breaks down. You move from the safety of asynchronous text to the immediate high-pressure environment of a live conversation.
Qualifications on paper mean absolutely nothing if you sit down in that chair, the pressure spikes, and you completely forget how to form a coherent sentence.
And it happens constantly. Interview failures are rarely due to a candidate lacking the necessary qualifications.
Because if you're in the room, they already know you can do it.
Exactly. If you are sitting in the room, the company has already decided you can do the job on paper. Candidates fail because they haven't organized their thoughts for a highly unnatural environment.
Yeah, the nerves just take over.
The nervousness, the pressure to answer quickly without rambling, the tendency to go completely blank. It's a universal human reaction to stress. The antidote is rehearsal.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. We all think we sound brilliant in our own heads. Like, you imagine an interview question while you're driving, and in your mind, your answer is a masterful, sweeping monologue.
Oh, for sure.
But then you open your mouth in the actual interview, and it's just a disorganized word salad. How does typing or speaking to an AI actually bridge that gap between our internal confidence and our external communication?
Because it forces externalization. Whether you are typing or using voice-to-text to dictate your answer to Claude, you are forcing your brain to translate abstract, floating concepts into linear language.
It makes it real.
Right. Claude then acts as a highly objective mirror. It catches the circular logic and the missing context that your brain usually glosses over.
So you can practice the predictable questions, like, tell me about yourself.
Yes. Which, by the way, should be a 90-second professional summary tailored to this specific role, not your life history. Or the biggest weakness question, which is really just testing your self-awareness and how you are actively fixing it.
You can just ask Claude to role-play with you then.
Exactly. You provide Claude with the company details and the job description and prompt it. Act as the hiring manager for this role. Ask me the 5 most likely questions one at a time and critique my answers for clarity and impact.
That is vastly different from just staring in a mirror and practicing. It gives you an active feedback loop. Especially for those behavioral questions, the classic, tell me about a time when questions.
Those are the hardest ones.
We all know the STAR method: situation, task, action, result. But structuring a narrative on the fly while 3 people are staring at you is brutal.
It is incredibly difficult. And the mistake people make with AI here is just telling Claude, write a STAR story for me.
Yeah, that would sound totally fake.
The output will sound completely artificial. The advanced technique is to use Claude to structure your raw thoughts. You do a completely disorganized brain dump.
Just ramble at it.
Just dictate. We had a project. The client was mad about the deadline. I realized the engineering team wasn't talking to the design team, so I instituted a daily stand-up, and we shipped it with 2 days to spare.
Which is how normal people actually remember events.
Exactly. Then you feed that mess to Claude with a specific prompt. Act as an expert career coach. Take this brain dump, extract the core conflict, highlight my specific interventions, and format it into a tight 90-second STAR narrative.
What?
It takes the immense cognitive load of structuring off your plate. You aren't memorizing a script. You are internalizing a well-organized framework of your own lived experience so you can focus entirely on your delivery in the room.
You are building muscle memory for your own stories. But the strategic framing doesn't end when you walk out of the interview room, does it?
Not at all.
The post-conversation etiquette and the final salary negotiation are where the leverage truly shifts.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the closing process actually begins before the interview even starts through meticulous research.
Pre-interview research.
Right. You can use Claude to analyze the company's recent press releases, earnings reports, or industry news to understand exactly how they make money and what their macro-level struggles are.
So you can ask them questions.
Knowing this allows you to ask them highly calibrated questions at the end of the interview. It signals that you are treating this interaction as a peer-to-peer business opportunity, not just a plea for a paycheck.
And when you get home from the interview, there is the 24-hour follow-up email. When you are sitting at your desk at 11 p.m., staring at a blank text box, your brain is usually completely fried from the adrenaline crash.
Oh, absolutely fried.
That is exactly when you offload the cognitive burden to the system. You prompt Claude with one specific interesting detail from your conversation, maybe a challenge the interviewer mentioned, or a shared philosophy on the industry.
Integrating that specific detail is what makes the follow-up feel genuine rather than transactional. Claude can draft a concise, professional thank you note around that detail in seconds, preserving your mental energy for the final and often most stressful hurdle.
The salary negotiation. I think the biggest mental trap people fall into here is negotiating based on what I like to call the cost of living metric.
Yes, the personal finance trap.
We walk into the room thinking, well, my rent just went up, my commute is longer, and groceries are expensive, so I need this specific amount of money to survive.
It is a natural human instinct, but from a strategic standpoint, an employer cannot do anything with your personal expenses.
Right, they don't care about your rent.
Telling a hiring manager that your rent increased gives them absolutely no business justification to increase your offer. It places you in the position of an anxious applicant asking for a favor.
So how do we shift that dynamic?
You anchor your number entirely to market data and the explicit value you bring to their specific problems. You never walk into a negotiation without having Claude analyze the market rate for this specific skill set in this specific city for a company of this specific size.
You need the data backing you up.
Exactly. When you present a counteroffer, you say, based on market data for this region and the specific revenue-generating responsibilities we discussed for this role, the appropriate range is X to Y. That is a business case. A rational employer can respond to data.
It fundamentally transforms you from a subordinate into an equal business partner discussing an equitable exchange of value.
That's the psychological shift.
But knowing that strategy conceptually and actually executing it when your heart is pounding and the recruiter is waiting on the phone, well, those are two very different things.
Which is why you script the exact words beforehand. Under pressure, our instinct is either to deflect, apologize, or just blurt out a poorly calibrated number because the silence on the phone feels unbearable.
We just want to end the awkwardness.
Right. If you use Claude to run a simulation of the negotiation and you have the exact, confident, data-backed phrases written down on a piece of paper in front of you, you don't panic. You rely on the architecture you built when you were calm.
You're offloading the emotional regulation to your past self. But doing all of this, tailoring the resume for the predictive differential, analyzing the job description for proxy metrics, writing a custom narrative cover letter, running interview simulations, researching market data, doing that for one job is an undertaking.
It's a lot of work.
Doing it for 30 jobs while you are currently employed or dealing with the stress of unemployment, it feels like a logistical impossibility.
The cognitive load of a modern job search is staggering. You are managing a pipeline of applications, tracking varying deadlines, remembering who to follow up with, and constantly context switching between different company cultures.
It's a full-time job in itself.
Relying on willpower alone is a recipe for burnout.
And you shouldn't rely on some rigid, idealized productivity system you found on a tech blog that demands you wake up at 4 a.m. to send emails.
No, definitely not.
You can build a personalized system that fits your actual reality. You tell Claude, I'm currently working full-time. I have exactly 3 hours on Tuesday nights and 2 hours on Sunday mornings. Build me a triage system for applying to jobs that maximizes those specific windows without burning me out.
A system only has value if it seamlessly integrates with your actual habits. And when you systematize this approach across your entire search, the cumulative effects are profound.
How so?
Well, you stop wasting energy on applications that immediately hit an algorithm's wall. You preserve your emotional bandwidth because your cover letters are actually being read. You walk into interviews with a calm nervous system because you've already externalized and refined your narratives.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? When you are sitting there tonight looking at another daunting job portal, remember this. AI is not a magic wand.
No,
It cannot fabricate 5 years of executive management experience if you don't have it, and it doesn't eliminate the reality of market competition. But what it does do is completely eliminate the presentation gap. It stops you from being the highly qualified candidate who gets overlooked simply because you didn't know the exact dialect the employer was listening for.
It allows you to present the sharpest, most articulate, and most strategically aligned version of your true professional self at scale.
We've gone from translating your resume to navigate the semantics of an algorithm, to injecting human narrative into a cover letter, structuring the chaos of your memory into high-impact interview stories, and finally anchoring your worth to undeniable market data.
It is a complete paradigm shift in how we prove our value. It creates an unprecedented level of parity in the hiring process.
Leveling the playing field.
Exactly. The barrier to entry is no longer whether you know how to format a resume, it is whether you know how to direct the tools at your disposal.
It really does level the playing field. But, it also leaves us with a deeply fascinating paradox to consider. If tools like Claude become the absolute ubiquitous standard, if every single candidate is perfectly translating their skills into the exact language the employer wants to hear, with flawless formatting, perfectly optimized proxy metrics, and rehearsed star stories, how will companies adapt?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. If the presentation gap is completely closed for everyone, will the traditional resume and cover letter eventually lose all meaning? And if they do, what entirely new, perhaps far more intense methods will we be forced to invent to prove our unique human value when the AI handles all the translation? Something to mull over the next time you're staring down an application. Because you no longer have to just shout into the void. You have the universal translator now. You just have to decide what you are going to say.
This is The Brief on the AI Decoded podcast. AI Decoded is a weekly show that provides actionable tech advice, and today we are looking at their broadcasting footprint and upcoming programming. Keeping up with AI tools feels kind of like navigating this dense, totally unpredictable jungle, which is exactly why finding a reliable guide is absolutely crucial. First, where do you find that guide? Well, listeners can expect a new episode every single week, accessible across all major platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. So why